Alright, so this video is all about how comedian Andrew Schulz rose to prominence. Now, you may know Andrew Schulz from his viral stand-up clips, his show Flagrant 2, or the Brilliant Idiots podcast. He recently just finished touring for his latest comedy special, Infamous, and he stands as one of the hottest comics in the game right now. So how exactly did he rise to prominence? Andrew Cameron Schulz was born on October 30th, 1983 in New York City to Sandra Cameron and Larry Schulz. His mother was a migrant from Scotland and his dad was American-born with German and Irish ancestry. Andrew's parents owned the Sandra Cameron Dance Center in Lower Manhattan, which they ran for about 3 decades. They lived in the East Village, and Andrew attended multiple public schools in the area, including Lily DeVoe Blake Primary School, Robert F. Wagner Middle School, and Baruch College Campus High School. He eventually went on to attend the University of UC Santa Barbara, which is where he ended up meeting his current business manager, Dove, that you may have seen on Flagrant 2. Schulz would go on to graduate with a BA in psychology and would eventually start working in the service industry shortly after. There is where his comedy career would unknowingly begin. The restaurant he worked at held open mic nights regularly, and one evening he was persuaded by one of the producers there to give it a try. Andrew initially wasn't even interested but decided to give it a shot. In an interview with Medium.com, he says, "I didn't want to perform comedy. I always loved humor, loved making people laugh. I was a big stand-up fan. It wasn't until I was managing a restaurant that had a comedy night and one of the producers asked me to go on stage that I wanted to do it." This led him to eventually moving back to New York City, where he would continue to refine his act. He became a regular within the comedy circuit, performing at clubs like the Comedy Strip Live, Stand Up New York, and the Village Underground. In 2009, he made his first leap into television, appearing on The Rise of the Radio Show.
Leave that for a second. Come on.
Dude, he did. I was working hard for the radio show, and he just stormed into the radio station, and he just threw this paper on the table, and he was like, "Sign this paper, cauliflower face."
Hey, Andrew, mind signing this one real quick?
Yeah.
Then in the following year, he made an appearance on MTV's New Year's Bash. This appearance would lead into one of his biggest breaks at the time, when he was casted as a member on MTV2's Guy Code.
Think of binge dating like a flight of beers, okay? You've got this huge selection. Oh, here, ooh, this is a little chocolatey. I'm kind of into chocolate. This one has a lot of hops. Not so much into hops. This one has no gag reflex. That's the one for me.
It was there where he actually met Charlamagne the God, who was and is still currently co-hosting the #1 hip-hop morning radio show of the past decade, The Breakfast Club. It was still in the early years for the radio show, and at the time, podcasting just started to really emerge. Chris Murrow, co-founder and CEO of the Loudspeakers Network, began pushing Charlamagne to start one of his own podcasts. When thinking of potential co-hosts, Andrew was one of the first guys who came to mind. They would eventually join forces to form the Brilliant Idiots, which has been running consistently since April of 2014. Their very first episode was named Starship Enterprise, and they were off and running.
Greetings.
What's up?
How are you?
Good, man. Welcome to the show.
Oh, this is a show?
Yeah, it's our podcast. I guess it's a show.
This was a pivotal point in Schulz's career because the podcast exposed him to an even larger audience, considering the notoriety and pull that See the God was bringing to the table. The show was how I initially came across Schulz myself. The podcast became a hit, developing a well-rounded fan base while they would discuss various topics such as politics, pop culture, sports, and current events.
My dick looks like me, bro.
Right? How does it look?
It looks like me, like my shape, like my like the way
you
I'm.
got a few colors on that shit.
Like I'm not like
Charlamagne's dick look like them pigs in the Bahamas that Duval hangs out with.
So like I'm not short.
Foreskin is amazing.
I don't have foreskin.
Schulz continued to try and develop his comedy routine, but would continue to get rejected by every major network he had the chance to pitch for. This would eventually lead him to releasing his comedy special 441 exclusively on YouTube. This move was a game changer, as it completely shifted the comedy game going forward, as we would see it become a trend for comics to drop their specials on YouTube, as opposed to the popular production houses such as Netflix and HBO that were so coveted at the time. The 17-minute comedy special was him basically performing at various comedy clubs around NYC, 4 sets at 4 clubs in one night. Some would say that the title was partially inspired by Jay-Z's 444, which had dropped earlier that year, but I'm not entirely sure if he ever confirmed that, although it kind of makes sense. His next move would be another major step forward in increasing his brand awareness and his overall reach, the Flagrant 2 pod. About a week after the 441 release, Schulz would drop the first episode of the Flagrant 2 podcast with his original co-hosts Akash Singh and Kaz. Over time, Kaz and Flagrant eventually parted ways, which led some to believe that it was due to Kaz consistently being late and or not taking the show as seriously, although this is just speculative. But if you listen to the show early on, you'll kind of remember the spats they would have over this.
Okay, so Kaz showed up late once again. How many latenesses do we have for Kaz? There's a lot of latenesses.
So first off,
We'll get there.
all
We'll
right.
get there, Kaz.
Let's-
We'll get there. No, I want
no,
you to give your time to speak. I just want to set the
geez.
table.
You just
I
get to
want to
speak.
give your time to
Why don't
speak.
you just speak?
The show initially started off as a sports podcast, but eventually branched out into much deeper and dense topics similar to the Brilliant Idiots, but it also served as a way for Schulz and crew to kind of work on the material and practice their improv. The show over time would eventually feature the characters people are more familiar with on the show today, which consists of comedian Mark Gagnon, Akash Singh, and producer/cameraman Alex Medio. The following year, on June 28, 2018, he went on to release his follow-up special, the similarly titled 551. It charted at #1 on the comedy charts on iTunes, Amazon Music, and Google Play. It also reached #1 on the Billboard comedy chart, which at the time was unheard of for a stand-up's first official release. Schulz at this point had built up so much momentum and notoriety that he was finally getting the opportunity to produce a special with one of the big name production houses he always sought after, Netflix. On December 17, 2020, Andrew dropped Schulz Saves America. The 4-part series featured him sitting down while basically delivering rapid-fire jokes covering an array of topics and events from the past year.
2020, you life-leeching, dream-destroying, shit-sniffing truffle pig. It's time for some payback.
Fast forward to 2022, Schulz was ready to drop his next highly anticipated special titled Infamous, which was set to release via Amazon Prime, who actually won it in a bidding war against Netflix. Prior to its release, while he was still prepping for the show, Amazon approached him and wanted him to edit out some of the jokes. Rather than comply with their wishes, he decided to use his life savings to buy his special back. A major risk that he felt was a necessary move for him to maintain his reputation and his integrity as a comic, while also pushing back against the constant censorship towards comedians that was and is still happening today.
So here's the story. Basically, my special was with a streamer. And then we sent the streamer a finished version of the special, and they kind of freaked out and they said, we can't put this out. These jokes are wild.
He would then go on to self-release the special on his website, where he would charge $15 to watch it. Ultimately, the risk worked out in his favor when he would eventually make back his money and even profited significantly in the process, although the buck didn't stop there. Amazon was the only business looking to censor him. He was set to perform at Massey Hall in Toronto when they decided to call him a week before he was set to take the stage to tell him they were canceling the show. Due to this, he had to find another venue on short notice, and he eventually relocated to nearby Meridian Hall, and tickets to his second show sold out.
What up, people? Yes, this jacket is fire, but focus. I want to tell you a story. Toronto. The infamous tour is coming, and we're doing it at Meridian Hall, but it wasn't always supposed to be at Meridian Hall. Originally, the show was booked at Massey Hall. We had the show locked in, and then Massey Hall hit me up a few weeks ago, and they said, hey, we have to cancel your shows. I go, why? They go, well, we looked you up, and you tell inappropriate jokes, and we no longer want inappropriate jokes on our stage.
Schulz has solidified himself as being one of the top comedians of his generation, breaking barriers, changing the status quo, and revolutionizing how the art form is consumed today. It'll be interesting to see how the next stages of his career will go, but as for now, we can only wait and see.